At 7:10 on the night of November 10, 1975, a ship's captain sent one last, calm message out into a raging storm. 4 words. We are holding our own. 10 minutes later, the largest ship on the Great Lakes had vanished from the radar. No distress call. No flare. No lifeboats. 29 men, gone in the time it takes to tell you about them. Her name was the Edmund Fitzgerald. When she launched in 1958, she was the biggest ship ever to sail the Great Lakes. 729 feet of steel, a floating giant that hauled iron ore across an inland sea the size of a country. Sailors called her the Queen of the Lakes. For 17 years, she was the pride of the entire fleet. On the 9th of November, 1975, she set out on a routine run, loaded with 26,000 tons of iron ore, bound from Superior, Wisconsin, for the mills near Detroit. At her helm stood a veteran captain, Ernest McSorley. And not far behind her followed another freighter, the Arthur M. Anderson. The two ships would keep each other company across the lake. They had made this crossing many times before. But a monster was forming over Lake Superior. A November gale. The kind of storm these lakes are infamous for. The winds climbed toward hurricane force, gusting past 70 miles an hour. And the waves began to build. 10 feet, then 20, then over 30, marching out of the darkness in endless rows. By late afternoon, the Fitzgerald was in trouble. McSorley radioed the Anderson. He had lost his radar. He was taking on water. And the ship had developed a list, leaning to one side. He slowed down, and asked the Anderson to help guide him through the storm. The bigger, prouder ship was now leaning on her companion just to find the way. The two vessels pushed on into the night, blind in the snow and the freezing spray. On the Anderson's radar screen, the Fitzgerald was now just a faint, fading shape. The only thread still connecting her to the rest of the world. Then, at 7:10, came that final exchange. The Anderson called over to ask how they were holding up. McSorley's answer was steady. Almost reassuring. We are holding our own. Those were the last words anyone would ever hear from the Edmund Fitzgerald. About 10 minutes later, the Anderson's crew looked back at their radar, and the Fitzgerald was simply not there. No mayday. No warning of any kind. 729 feet of ship and 29 men had dropped off the face of the lake between one sweep of the radar and the next. When the search began, there was almost nothing to find. Some debris on the surface. 2 shattered lifeboats, empty and useless. And not a single body. Lake Superior is so cold that it rarely gives up its dead. The men of the Fitzgerald are still down there, with their ship. The wreck was found days later, in 530 feet of water. And it told a grim story. The Edmund Fitzgerald had broken clean in two. Her bow and her stern lay on the lakebed about 150 feet apart. Whatever happened to her, happened with terrible force, and it happened fast. And that is the heart of the mystery. How does the largest, strongest ship on the lake sink in minutes, with no time for a single distress call? For 50 years, investigators have argued over 3 possible answers. The first, her hatch covers. If the clamps that sealed her giant cargo hold had failed, the waves washing over her deck could have poured straight into the hull, flooding her slowly, invisibly, hour after hour, until she was simply too heavy to rise again. The second, the Three Sisters. A phenomenon of Lake Superior, where 3 monstrous waves strike in quick succession. 2 of them bury the deck under tons of water. And before the ship can shed it, the third arrives, and drives her nose first into the lake. The third, shoaling. Some believe she scraped a shallow ridge earlier in the storm, tearing open her hull beneath the waterline. And then she quietly filled with water for hours, until the sea finally took her down. We may never know which one is true. Perhaps it was all of them at once. With no survivors, and no distress call, the Edmund Fitzgerald kept her secret. And Lake Superior keeps it still. What remains is the human weight of it. 29 men who kissed their families goodbye for a routine trip and never came home. No bodies to bury. No final message but a captain's quiet, "We are holding our own." But her memory never sank. A folk song turned the wreck into a legend. Her bell was raised from the deep, and now it rings out once for each of the 29, every single year. Half a century on, the wound has never fully closed. The last thing anyone ever heard from the Edmund Fitzgerald was calm. And then the greatest ship on the Great Lakes was simply gone. This has been Below. Stay with us. The water keeps far more stories than it ever gives back.